When the images first began circulating on X, they struck the kind of nerve only deep space mysteries can hit. On the left, a strange golden smear hovered against a field of black, 3I Atlas. On the right lay a hand-drawn sketch surrounded by scattered colored markers, an elongated shape, diamond-like core, and looping arrows charting invisible forces. The drawing wasn't a scientific prediction or a lab reconstruction. It came from a YouTuber who claimed to have remote viewed the object without knowing what the target was. The side-by-side comparison quickly fueled speculation that the resemblance was no coincidence. What if 3I Atlas was some ancient ET craft warning beacon attached near Nibiru's orbit? Remote viewing itself has a long, complicated history that reaches back to Cold War-era intelligence programs. The method involves attempting to perceive distant or hidden targets using only focused consciousness, with no sensory input. This is where Birdie stepped in, whose drawings emerged before the telescope image existed. Her remote viewing session produced an elongated object with a broad head and trailing taper, tumbling in what she described as rolling and multi-directional motion. The sketch showed a bright internal region, a structured core, and even a shaded cavity near the wider section of the form. It was an unusually geometric interpretation of a natural comet, one with straight edges, pointed features, and directional lines indicating both motion and an internal asymmetry. The emphasis was on structure, age, and an embedded feature that appeared deliberately placed inside a natural shell. Her interpretation drifted toward metaphor, a lighthouse drifting through the dark, a warning beacon carried by a vessel that wasn't itself artificial but had been used for an ancient purpose. She described it as a cosmic echo, something installed long before Earth formed, tumbling across the galaxy, transmitting or radiating something subtle but intentional. It was less a machine and more a messenger, a drifting reminder of a forgotten event or intelligence. Stranger still, Birdie wasn't alone. Other remote viewers began posting their findings online as well. One of the most talked about came from Angela Ford, a former US government-associated remote viewer whose work was once tied to intelligence programs attempting to study psychic perception. Ford's notes described 3I Atlas as baffling to scientists, moving very fast, pushing forward with a kind of drive that appeared unusual. She noted bright coloration, intentional motion, and something designed about the object. Her writing suggested it was not harmful to humanity, and might even prove beneficial once studied. Ford speculated that the object may have accidentally veered off its intended course, implying that the original purpose of 3I Atlas had been engineered, not natural. She didn't claim it was alien tech outright, but she pointed out that if something seems engineered, someone engineered it, a statement that ignited discussion among those already following the remote viewing coincidences. Suddenly, the conversation surrounding 3I Atlas wasn't limited to astronomers and space agencies. It was being shaped by independent voices, remote viewers, amateur astrophotographers, citizen analysts, and online theorists who were posting new findings every day. And some of those findings were visually stunning. One of the clearest pieces of evidence came from an astrophotographer who captured 3I Atlas glowing green as it passed in front of a distant galaxy. The image showed jets streaming from the nucleus, an ion tail stretching to one side, and an anti-tail of dust stretching to the other. The object structure was unmistakable, a bright green core tapering into a long, thin, bluish tail. Even scientists were astonished. The photographer noted that this interstellar visitor looked more like a traditional comet than any previous interstellar object, making it accessible even to amateur instruments. The clarity of the jets, the distinct core, and the coloration only deepened the mystery because they aligned uncannily with the shapes and energy emphasis described in the remote viewing drawings months earlier. Then came a wave of additional high-resolution images from independent observers. Michael Yeager, an astrophotographer in Australia, produced one of the most widely shared pictures, showing a brilliant emerald nucleus with a sleek blue tail extending across the starfield. The core glowed sharply, with a clean, structured boundary that made the central region look almost crystalline. This photo looked eerily similar to Birdie's sketch, which showed a pointed, glowing core inside a stretched body. Other independent observers, such as Ray's Astrophotography, posted videos like, "Comet 3I Atlas is rotating blank. I took a picture." Ray highlighted rotation anomalies, moments where the comet's core seemed to flicker or blank, and odd brightness patterns that suggested an internal structure rather than a diffuse amorphous coma. The images showed the nucleus appearing almost segmented at times, with brightness shifting in a way that was difficult to reconcile with a simple cloud of ice and dust. The anomalies were subtle, but to attentive observers, they were unmistakable. As the independent community continued sharing their data, NASA held a scheduled briefing about 3I Atlas. Expectations were high. By this point, amateurs had revealed details of rotation, complex jets, core dynamics, and even structural irregularities. But the NASA event presented no new imagery, no new analysis, and no acknowledgement of anomalies. Instead, it repeated earlier information, relying on older frames that had circulated for weeks. To many following the story, the briefing felt anticlimactic, almost evasive. There was no mention of the rapidly spreading images from amateurs, no commentary on the shape of the core or the behavior of the tail, no discussion of the object's hyperbolic motion beyond standard explanations, and notably, no response to the scientific concerns raised by Avi Loeb. Loeb, a Harvard astrophysicist known for challenging orthodox assumptions about interstellar visitors, had already published several early notes pointing out that 3I Atlas shared an uncomfortable amount of behavioral overlap with Oumuamua. In his view, the anomalies were not evidence of extraterrestrial engineering, not yet, but they were red flags in the data that demanded deeper scientific scrutiny instead of polite avoidance. He emphasized that 3I Atlas did not behave like the typical icy wanderers that populate the solar system. Its brightness curve fluctuated in ways that didn't fully track with solar illumination or dust production. Its rotation did not match the expected wobble from uneven outgassing. Some portions of its surface appeared sharply defined rather than diffuse, indicating a shape with cleaner edges than most comets. There were even hints in the trajectory, subtle but measurable, of non-gravitational acceleration that went beyond what sublimation alone could explain. These weren't idle speculations from a fringe theorist. They were measured observations from a tenured astrophysics chair who had made a career identifying anomalies in deep space. Yet as NASA delivered its public briefing, none of these questions were acknowledged. The absence of commentary wasn't neutral. It felt deliberate. Loeb's interviews were circulating widely. Journalists were echoing his concerns. Amateur analysts were dissecting his statements line by line. And still NASA's event bypassed every point, sticking to safe, familiar talking points about standard comet behavior and historical context. Had this happened in a vacuum, the silence might have passed unnoticed, but the contrast between official restraint and independent enthusiasm was becoming too stark to ignore. As the agency stalled behind stock slides and familiar talking points, amateurs with backyard telescopes were posting daily updates with more detail, more clarity, and more candor than any institutional source. Their images showed a vibrant green nucleus, sharp structure, and a tail that behaved unpredictably. Their rotation charts captured flashing, blanking moments in the core that the agency made no mention of. Their videos documented features that seemed to support, rather than dismiss, the anomalies Loeb was trying to get the scientific community to address. In parallel, independent remote viewers, long before the new telescope data existed, were mapping shapes and behaviors that were suddenly, uncomfortably, matching the visual evidence now emerging. Sketches drawn months earlier contain the same elongated head, the same pointed geometry, the same internal bright wedge that would later appear in NASA's infrared imagery. Even skeptics admitted the resemblance was uncanny, too uncanny. The core seen in the sketches wasn't soft or spherical. It was sharp, angled, directional, just like the glowing region visible in the updated images. The tapering extension drawn by hand was nearly identical in proportion to the narrow, bluish tail captured in high-resolution astrophotography. Coincidence was the obvious explanation, the safe explanation, but the match refused to fade. Remote viewing, dismissed by mainstream science as pseudoscience, should not have produced a blueprint that mirrored a future infrared capture. Yet there it was, time-stamped, uploaded, and now circulating alongside the official images, as if daring people to explain how intuition crossed paths with data. Was it simply the brain's extraordinary ability to project familiar patterns onto ambiguous shapes? Was it luck? Or did the viewer tap into something real, something we don't have the language or tools to measure yet? No one could provide a definitive answer, and NASA offered no attempt. In the widening gap between institutional silence and grassroots discovery, the mystery grew. And as it did, more people began to wonder whether the official narrative was incomplete or whether the truth was emerging from a place no one expected. In a world where information spreads faster through citizen science than institutional pipelines, the gap between official explanations and grassroots discoveries leaves room for speculation, and speculation thrives where mysteries deepen. Did the remote viewers tap into something real, or did they intuitively anticipate a shape that coincidentally emerged? Why did NASA avoid discussing anomalies so plainly visible in amateur imagery? Why did an interstellar object behave so much like a traditional comet, yet still display irregularities that defied easy explanation? None of these questions have definitive answers, but the conversation around 3I Atlas reveals something profound about modern discovery. Institutions are no longer the sole source of truth. Independent observers, armed with advanced equipment and unhindered curiosity, are driving the frontier of exploration. Their images, their questions, and their willingness to entertain what others dismiss have reshaped the narrative. Whether the remote viewer drawings are coincidence or something stranger, they have become part of the story. In the end, the mystery of 3I Atlas is not just about what the object is, but how we see it, through data, through intuition, through skepticism, and through wonder. The universe doesn't always give us clean answers. Sometimes it offers clues scattered across different minds and different instruments, leaving us to assemble the meaning ourselves. And when coincidences line up too perfectly to ignore, the boundary between science and speculation becomes thin enough to spark new questions. Maybe 3I Atlas is only a comet. Maybe it's carrying a story older than time. Or maybe the truth lies somewhere in the space between, in the patterns we notice, the signals we trace, and the possibility that reality is stranger than our current tools can measure. Whatever the case, the remote viewer's prediction stands as a curiosity that challenges our assumptions and demands we look again, not only at the sky, but at how we decide what is possible.